Mark and I, 5 years, planning our dream wedding. He was my rock, my best friend, my entire future. He worked in IT, a demanding job that often meant business trips and late-night calls. But he always kept in touch, always made me feel loved and secure. We had joint accounts, shared dreams, absolutely no secrets. Or so I thought. The day it all crumbled was a Tuesday. Mark had left for a 3-day conference in another city. We'd said goodbye the night before. A kiss, a promise to miss each other. Tuesday morning, as I was tidying up, I found it. His wallet, sitting innocently on the coffee table. He must have been in such a rush. My first thought was panic. Mark, without his wallet, his ID, his cards, he'd be stranded. A 2-hour drive to the hotel where the conference was being held. I decided to surprise him. I'd drop it off, give him a quick hug, and be back home before he even knew what happened. The thought of his face, surprised and relieved, made me smile. When I arrived at the Grand Hotel, the lobby hummed with conference attendees. At the reception desk, I gave Mark's full name, Mark Kowalski, and asked for his room number. The receptionist, a young woman with a polite smile, checked her screen. Her brows furrowed slightly. "Ms. Nowak?" she asked, her voice tinged with confusion. But Mr. Kowalski, that is, Mr. Mark Kowalski, booked a single room. My last name was Zions. My smile faltered. I quickly corrected her, explaining I was his fiancé, almost his wife. She just offered a polite, almost pitying shrug. "Perhaps another Ms. Kowalski," she murmured, before finally giving me a room number, 407. She said she'd double-check if Mr. Kowalski had any other bookings in the system. Just to be sure, a cold, unfamiliar knot formed in my stomach. Another Ms. Kowalski? Why did she sound so knowing? We weren't married yet. I pushed the unsettling thought aside, dismissing it as a hotel mix-up. The elevator ride felt agonizingly slow. My excitement was now laced with a growing sense of unease. I reached room 407. I took a deep breath, composed myself, and knocked. Silence. I knocked again, a little harder. This time I heard it. Muffled voices from inside. Mark's voice, unmistakable. And then, a woman's voice. It wasn't mine. My heart began to pound a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I tried to rationalize it. A colleague, maybe. They were surely just discussing a project. But the tone was too soft, too intimate, too close. Without thinking, I pressed the doorknob. It gave slightly. The door was ajar. And what I saw next made my entire world collapse into a million shattered pieces. Mark was sitting on the bed, and next to him, incredibly close, sat a woman. His arm was casually around her back, and her head rested comfortably on his shoulder. They were smiling at each other, a shared, intimate smile. This wasn't a work colleague. This wasn't just an acquaintance. This was the same blonde woman I'd seen in his business trip photos, always dismissed as just a team member. But this was too close. Far too close. The wallet, still clutched in my trembling hand, slipped from my fingers and hit the carpet with a dull thud that echoed like a gunshot in the sudden silence. Mark and the woman spun around, startled. His eyes, the same eyes that always looked at me with such tenderness, were now wide with pure, unadulterated terror. The woman beside him looked surprised, then quickly mortified. It was indeed the blonde he'd introduced as a project colleague from a partner company. Mark scrambled off the bed. "Darling, it's not what you think," he stammered, his voice laced with desperation. But it was exactly what I thought. My body felt like it had turned to stone. Tears, hot and silent, streamed down my face. I couldn't utter a single word. It felt like I'd been punched in the gut, winded. All our 5 years, all our plans, every ounce of love I'd poured into us, it was all a devastating, humiliating lie. The woman started to say something, but Mark quickly cut her off. He looked at me, and in his eyes, the terror had given way to a defeated, almost resigned emptiness. This was it, the end. I retreated, backing out of the room, turning, and running towards the elevator. I didn't listen to his frantic shouts. I didn't look back. I got into my car and just drove. For hours. Aimlessly. He had destroyed me. He had destroyed everything. It wasn't until much later, sobbing uncontrollably in my best friend's arms, that the receptionist's words resurfaced in my mind. "Ms. Nowak, Mark had been lying. And it wasn't just about this woman in the hotel room. It was deeper. Was she his wife? Had he been living a horrifying double life?" I drove home. The apartment, once our sanctuary, now felt cold, alien. I immediately started tearing through Mark's belongings. I didn't find any marriage certificates or obvious damning documents. But then, tucked away deep in the back of his closet, in an old shoebox, I found it. Letters, love letters, from her. Dated back 2 years? It had started 2 years ago. And worse, much, much worse, I found a birth certificate. A child's birth certificate. A child who was 1 year old and bore the last name Kowalski. She wasn't his cousin. She wasn't just a colleague. She was his wife. And they had a child together. Mark had a second, perfectly hidden life. That innocent wallet, meant to be a simple surprise, had ripped open years of elaborate lies, a devastating betrayal, and a secret family I never knew existed. I never saw him again. I changed the locks, packed his belongings, and left them outside the door. I sent him one last text message. "I know everything. We're done." To this day, that story is a gaping wound in my soul. People ask how I couldn't have noticed. And I honestly don't know. I was so blinded by love, so trusting. He left behind an unbearable void, and I'm still fighting every day to trust anyone again. That Tuesday, the day I found that wallet, was the beginning of the end, of my innocence and the absolute shattering of my heart. Sometimes I truly wish I had never found that wallet.